Hi, good afternoon, readers, on this dreary, rainy, cool fall day. We're definitely experiencing a change of sceneries, even just over the course of the week. Well, we are on the second chapter of our book, Inspired, The Well and Deliverance Stories. And I was really excited about this chapter because the story that she does this imagination with in the beginning is the story of Hagar. And it is one of my favorite biblical stories, that this woman who is an outsider, who has no agency for herself, who is on the lowest rung of the social ladder, gets to meet God. And not only meet God, but to name God and to receive a promise from God of that a nation will come of her. And she is the only woman in the whole Bible to do this, to receive that particular promise and to name God. So it's a fascinating story, and I always like to engage with that story. So I hope you found it interesting as well. And it's through her story and then through the Exodus story, the story of God bringing the Israelites out of Egypt, out of the house of slavery, that we talk about deliverance and the role that God plays in deliverance for people, that God is a God of justice. And so there's a couple different things that come out of that. First, there's, deliverance itself and being freed from something. God making a way when there doesn't seem to be a way. There's also this concept of a wilderness experience. Times when we find ourselves in these kind of barren places, times of uncertainty, times of grief, times of transition. I think they can take a lot of different stories. But through all of these justice acts by God, we see this theme of justice. Rachel Held Evans calls it the crimson thread of justice. And it is a thread that runs all the way through the stories of the Bible, from the Old Testament till the end of the New Testament. It is a very prominent theme. Our God is a God of justice. So in a couple other things, she really hits on some challenging points as well. She talks about the law and what the law means. And she talks about how Jesus is a fulfillment of that law, and that we look at not so much the rules then when Jesus comes, but how Jesus lives. And that becomes an interpretive lens for us to the Bible, which brings up the other kind of weighty issue, which is interpretation. And how we choose what we pick from the Bible to help us understand who God is. And that is Rachel Held Evans' assertion that we all pick and choose. We just pick and choose different things. So curious about what you think about that. And if you agree with it, what is the lens from which you choose as you read through these stories? What is it that is kind of the test of how you interpret the stories, or through which perspective that we look at the stories? Lots of other interesting things. I love her idea of dislocated exegesis. So that's a mouthful. Very simple terms. It's about looking at Scripture, reading Scripture, engaging with a story from Scripture in an unusual place. What does it mean to read Scripture? Like for me as a pastor, what does it mean for me to read a story here in my office and to engage with it as I'm preparing to preach? How might it be different? And it is different, but how might it be different when I sit at a coffee shop and read that same story and am engaging with the public at the same time? How might it be different again if I am doing my reading and studying in the doctor's office, or at the shopping mall, or at any number of places? So this is what she means by dislocated exegesis. It's about how we engage and imagine a story and work with a story in different places, and how that affects what we get out of it. And she talks about the perspectives we bring. You know, how do different circumstances of our lives and who we are act as a lens through which we read the Bible? Do we read certain stories differently if we are rich versus if we are poor? If we, say, grew up in a rural place or a urban place? If we've been victims of violence or injustice or oppression, how does that influence how we read those stories versus if we grew up with a lot of privilege in a very safe and sheltered situation? So just lots in this chapter, lots to wrestle and grapple with. I hope you're enjoying that. It's a good thing to do. It's a good thing to do, both with this book and with the scripture stories. So I'll be putting, as usual, a couple questions out on the Facebook page, and looking forward to hearing your thoughts and discussions. Thanks, and have a great day.